All right, let's talk about something that's on, well, pretty much everyone's mind these days. If you spend any time online, it's hard not to feel like we're just one wrong move away from total chaos. Every single headline feels like it's cranking up the tension. But what if a full-blown World War III is a lot less likely than your screen is making you believe? Let's get into it.
I mean, this quote just hits the nail on the head, right? You open your phone and it's Ukraine, it's Gaza, it's new tensions over Taiwan, Iran, North Korea's launching something again. It feels absolutely relentless, like this constant wave of crises hitting you all at once. And you know what? It's overwhelming, and frankly, it's kind of designed to be.
And that is the billion-dollar question we're tackling here. Because the anxiety you're feeling, that's totally real. But the reality of global conflict is so much more complex, and maybe, just maybe, a lot less hopeless than it looks on your timeline. Let's break it all down.
Okay, first things first, we have to talk about what I call the algorithm of anxiety. It's this idea that our view of the world isn't really objective anymore. Nope, it's being actively shaped by the tech we use every single day, and that tech feeds us a very specific and very alarming picture of what's happening out there.
Now just look at this comparison. It's wild. Back in 1939, on the brink of World War II, you might hear about a conflict on a radio broadcast, maybe once a day. That's it. Today, you can get 17 notifications about 4 different conflicts on 3 different continents before you've even had your first sip of coffee. That constant fire hose of information completely changes how we feel about the state of the world.
And this right here is the absolute core of the issue. It's a really critical distinction to make. It's not that the world is necessarily more violent than it used to be, but our exposure to that violence has gone through the roof. Every single skirmish, every threat, every bad thing is now broadcast in high def 24/7. And that changes everything about how we perceive risk. And here's the data that for some reason never seems to make it to the top of the feed. If you actually look at interstate wars, we're talking actual wars between countries. The long-term trend since 1945 has been steadily downward. Yeah, the conflicts we see today are real and they are awful, but they're mostly localized. The big picture is one of de-escalation between the major powers.
So the bottom line is this. Our information is being filtered through algorithms that reward fear because fear gets engagement. Fear gets clicks. And that creates this distorted map that looks like it's constantly on fire, when the reality is the camera is simply everywhere now.
But hey, it's not just about the algorithm. There are incredibly powerful, real-world reasons that make a global conflict, well, a war that nobody can possibly win. And this isn't about wishful thinking. It's about cold, hard economics and, of course, the big one. Nuclear weapons. I love this quote because it gets right to the point. This argument isn't based on some kind of idealism or a hope that world leaders will suddenly find their conscience. No, it's based on the cold, rational, spreadsheet-driven self-interest of nations and the people who run them.
Just take a look at a hypothetical war between the US and China. The global economy as we know it would instantly shatter. For China, its export markets, the entire foundation of its economic rise would vanish overnight. Poof. For the United States, its manufacturing supply chain is gone and it faces a massive debt crisis. It's basically an economic suicide pact. Both sides would lose far more than they could ever dream of gaining.
And then, of course, there's the ultimate backstop. The fundamental logic that has prevented a war between great powers for almost 80 years, mutually assured destruction, is still very much a thing. It's not a pretty concept, but man, is it effective.
And let's just walk through why this logic still holds up. First, a major conventional war is just ruinously expensive. Just ask Putin how that's going in Ukraine. Second, launching a single nuke is an all-or-nothing game. It forces every other nuclear power to respond, or they lose all credibility on the world stage. And finally, even the most aggressive dictators want to stay in power, right? And you can't be a dictator of a radioactive parking lot. The system holds not because leaders are good, but because they're rational enough to want to avoid their own annihilation. All right, this next part is a bit of a mind bender. We've talked about all the bad things we do see, but what about the things we don't? There are incredibly powerful defensive systems out there whose greatest successes are, by design, kept totally and completely secret.
Seriously, just sit with this question for a second. If a system worked perfectly, if it stopped an unimaginable catastrophe from happening, would you ever even hear about it? The answer is almost certainly no, and there's a very good reason for that.
And just so we're on the same page, we're not talking about science fiction here. These defensive systems are real and they exist right now. You've got Israel's Arrow 3, which can literally take out missiles outside the Earth's atmosphere. You've got the US's THAAD and Aegis systems. These are real, sophisticated layered defenses designed to do exactly this. Now let's just play this out. Imagine the government actually announced they'd shot down a nuke. Well, first, you've just confirmed that someone tried to launch one, which would trigger immediate worldwide panic. Markets would crash. Then, every single government on Earth would be forced to make a public statement. The diplomatic pressure to escalate would become almost impossible to resist. Secrecy is the only sane move.
So this leads us to a really counterintuitive idea. The silence is the system working. An absence of news isn't proof of failure. In this case, it's proof of quiet, successful prevention. We don't hear about the victories, and that is precisely the point.
So what is really, truly different between today and, say, 1939? Well, today we have a whole series of global systems in place. You can think of them as invisible guardrails that act as powerful brakes to stop things from spiraling out of control.
And these are just a few of them. The UN, for all its problems, it does mediate conflicts and get people talking. The internet provides instant public accountability for flimsy excuses to go to war. And new tech like AI is getting better and better at early threat detection. None of this stuff existed in 1914 or 1939.
And that is why the threshold for a real-world war is so incredibly high now. Now, this doesn't mean regional conflicts or proxy wars will stop. They won't. But for a genuine coordinated war between the major nuclear powers, every single one of these economic, nuclear, and diplomatic guardrails would have to fail all at the same time. It's not impossible, but it is a whole lot harder than your timeline makes it seem.
So, all this brings us to our final and maybe our most important point. If a massive world war isn't the most immediate threat, then what is? What's the real danger we're facing right now? Well, it's something a little more subtle.
The real danger has a name. It's called doom fatigue. It's that feeling of just complete exhaustion and hopelessness you get from that constant stream of terrible news. When everything feels like the end of the world, you eventually start to believe it, and that's when you stop trying to fix things.
And this right here is the real challenge. The risk isn't that a war is inevitable. The risk is that if enough of us become convinced that it is, we'll stop caring. We'll stop supporting diplomacy, we'll stop demanding accountability from our leaders, and we'll stop thinking critically. And that apathy, that's how preventable disasters become unpreventable.
So let's end on this one simple, powerful thought. The world is incredibly complicated. It's often terrible, but it is also resilient and far more stable than the algorithm wants you to believe. Stability doesn't get clicks, fear does. The most powerful thing you can do is just remember that what you're seeing on your screen is a curated, monetized, and often distorted version of reality.